week that the AOC would have approved time for Cindy Blitzer? So starting from the beginning of her term, can you give us the date and whether it's approved for a month or a week or?
The time that was approved by someone in Human Resources from January 1 through January 12th,
Okay.
that was most likely due to the fact that the employee transferred offices, and so the old office did not have access to approve it.
Okay.
And then 5 times other than that, and they were all holidays that were approved.
All right. And what were those dates?
January 19th of 2015, April 3rd of 2015, May 30th of 2016, September 5th of 2016.
And when those were approved by AOC, is that just for the holiday or is it for a week?
Just for the holiday.
Just for that
We
day.
would have pulled just that one day and approved just that one day for a multitude of employees,
Okay.
probably.
And in looking at that, it does reflect that the last period of time from the last approval on August 15th was not approved by anybody from District 9A. Is that right?
The last approval, which was just for the Labor Day holiday, was from an HR person.
Okay. All right. Now I want to ask you a question about the entry of Beacon. Mr. Latour asked you who entered Beacon, and you went through and you said it was all entered by Cindy Blitzer. Okay. Can you tell that by looking at the form, or does the form simply reflect that Cindy Blitzer and her number put it in?
It was created by Cindy Blitzer's number.
Okay. All right. So, for example, if she had gone to the AA in Rockingham and used her terminal to enter her Beacon time, could she do that?
If Cindy had entered in her user ID and her password, she could have gotten on any terminal anywhere that had internet access, whether it be at her home, at Stokes County Library, or anywhere else, and enter her time.
Is there some administrative way within the system where somebody else can enter Cindy Blitzer's time?
If someone had entered her time using, if I had entered her time, it would be my ID number.
Okay. And this may be too far, but is there any way to tell from the system where this originated from? Like what terminal, what?
No.
What?
No,
so it-
because it's any internet access anywhere.
Okay. All right. You had said right before we left, 75% of the elected DAs enter approval for their AA's time.
At least.
Is that right? Okay. And then typically the AA is approving other staff members?
Typically.
And do you cover the whole state?
I have had access to the whole state in dealings with this.
All right. And in multi-county districts, do you see the same? Or is it, all right, that typically the AA, even for employees in multiple counties,
Yes.
is doing the approval?
Correct.
Even though that supervisor is not right there necessarily seeing that person 8 hours a day, they double check mainly to look, oh, I know this person took vacation.
Sustained.
Isn't it true that it's more of an administrative function than I saw this person 8 hours a day?
Objection. Overruled.
It is a supervisor's job to ensure that what they are approving in Beacon is accurate.
All right. And so the AA that has a multi-county district, how do they do that?
I would assume They would each have their own different systems of keeping track of their employees.
Okay. I guess that was my next question. Each district is different, isn't that right? Run by different hiring authorities?
Yes, each office is different, yes.
All right. And Mr. Latour asked you to look for a piece of paper approving a shared employee program. You're not familiar with any AOC requirement that a shared employee program plan be approved, are you?
I've never heard of a shared employee plan.
Okay. Exempt and non-exempt employees. He asked you about that as well. The non-exempt employees would be who? The ADAs or the VWLAs?
This is where I always get confused myself.
That's okay, me too.
If you are non-exempt, then you are not subject to the Fair Labor Standards Act versus, I've screwed it up. You're either subject to the Fair Labor Standards Act or exempt from certain overtime provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Those that are subject to the overtime provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act are your victim witness legal assistants, your investigators, your administrative assistants, and therefore there are fair labor laws that apply to them of recording their time worked and their leave taken.
And so within the system, if an ADA works 60 hours in a week, that's not necessarily going to kick in overtime or any type of restriction like that. They just get their salary, is that
A
correct?
full-time assistant district attorney is exempt from the overtime provisions of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and therefore they could work 120 hours a week, and they are not subject to any overtime pay.
All right. But a victim witness legal assistant or an investigator, if they work over 40 hours, they are entitled to time and a half?
They are entitled to compensatory time of time and a half.
All right. Within the system, if a salaried employee like an investigator worked 30 hours in a week, how would that impact the salary generated by AOC?
It would only impact the salary if the other 10 hours that they entered were leave without pay. If they use 10 hours of leave, then they've covered their 40 hours.
All right. Within the system, what would happen if an employee put in 30 hours for the week?
And they were a 40-hour employee.
Right.
Then within probably 2 months of them entering it, an email would have been sent to their supervisor that they had not entered enough time for that week.
All right. Something to put them on notice of that.
Yeah, tell the supervisor to go back and have their employee finish entering their time.
All right. Other than the shared employee form that you've been asked by Mr. Latour, there is a salary modification form that's required, isn't there?
A salary increase form.
And that previously went through Margaret Wiggins, and you would have to fill out the form and the salary would be approved. And in some, maybe also, when Judge John Smith was director, he would be the one that approved the salary increase?
In certain cases, yes.
I asked that because Mr. Latour put a form up here that showed Cindy Blitzer's salary at the end when she was let go at 50. But before, the starting amount was at the allocation of an investigator, 47.9 or something like that. Can you explain to the jury why that changed? Because in looking at the file, there's no salary increase. Do you recall what happened that would have caused that
Just a
increase?
Let me look. When Cindy Blitzer was transferred, she was making $48,000. That was in 2015, February or late January 2015, and she separated in October of 16. If my memory serves correctly, there was a legislative increase
Okay, across
in
the
July
board.
across the board.
Okay. So
Either it could have been in 15 and in 16, or it could have just been in 16, and there would not be notes in that because that would have been automatic, as you said, across the board.
Okay, so, but having briefly looked through that, it does not appear that any raise was given, is that correct?
No.
Okay. There has been some testimony about a employee in Rockingham regarding victim service coordinator grant through the Conference of District Attorneys. I want to ask you briefly about that. Are you familiar with, in that victim witness legal assistance, that designation kind of changed to legal assistant? And
Yes,
then
the title changed.
and are you familiar with the Conference of District Attorneys got a grant ongoing to fund victim service coordinators?
Yes, sir.
All right. You could explain for the jury when these positions become through grant as a victim service coordinator, how does that interface with the AOC payroll system?
A grant position would also be in the Beacon system. The difference in a grant employee is that the funding is only for a set amount of time. They do accrue vacation and sick leave. They would put their time worked and their leave entry into the Beacon system. However, they are not guaranteed employment beyond when that grant ends, and they are not paid out any leave balances upon the ending of that grant, or if they separate for any other reason.
All right. So despite the source of money, isn't it true that the victim service coordinators that are throughout every district attorney's office through the state still are judicial branch employees, and they're still subject to entering their Beacon and having a supervisor approve it?
Yes, sir.
All right. And with the victim service coordinator, even through a grant, if, for example, they went to BLET during the day and still did 40 hours a week on non-standard hours, would there be a way for the Beacon system to accommodate that?
If they were still doing their hours per week, they could enter their time worked, because it's just hours. It's not non-standard or anything else. It's just hours worked.
Okay. And that would also require a supervisor to approve those hours as well.
In order for the employee to accrue vacation and sick.
All right, great. One more question. When someone who's a salaried employee and actually does report to their employer that they are going to school, is there a way to reduce those hours and benefits so that they can continue to go to school?
Yes.
Okay. Can I approach the witness, Your Honor? Were you in this, I'm sorry, I think I asked.
Yes, sir, you did. Thank you.
Were you in your same position in 2012?
I was just a salary administration specialist then.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as Defendant's Exhibit 13. Just take a minute to look at it yourself for a second.
Okay.
So I want to ask you, if someone is in a victim witness legal assistant position and they report to their employer that they want to go, for example, to law school, if it's approved by their hiring authority, can they contact AOC and ask to reduce the amount of hours and benefits?
The hiring authority can, yes.
All right, and in looking at Defendant's Exhibit 13, are you familiar with, in 2012, Tyler Henderson, who was an employee of mine, that actually went to law school? Do you remember that?
No.
Okay. In
I
looking
mean,
at,
in looking at the letter, I see that's what was requested.
right. And isn't it true, requested reduced to 20 hours a week, and at that level of hours, then the benefits stop, is that correct?
The health insurance stops and the retirement stops. He could still continue flex benefits.
All right, and that's something AOC could do for an employee who was full-time if the employee notifies their employer that that's what's happening.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anything further, Mr. Bradsher, for this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. May I approach?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to approach you with what you just looked at, which is Defendant's Exhibit 13, and that's that document that you said kind of refreshed your recollection, or that you see in this document about some 20 hours and reducing work so that someone can go to school, correct?
Correct.
And this was sent to, presumably, to AOC.
Correct.
And if this were sent to AOC, then that would make it in a personnel file, correct?
Correct.
And there may in fact be a action sheet as what we've already looked at about that, right?
Yes, it would require an action.
Okay. In looking at Cindy Blitzer's personnel sheet, did AOC ever receive a request from the defendant to reduce Cindy Blitzer's time so as to limit her benefits and her hours worked so that she could attend nursing school?
No, sir.
Had that occurred, would she have been paid for those 8 hours a day that she was going to nursing school as opposed to working for the state?
She would not have been paid for time she wasn't there.
Is it okay, under your understanding of Beacon, and it sounds like you've got an extensive working knowledge of the state's payroll and everything else, through your training and experience and knowledge, can an employee or an employer, specifically an elected district attorney, allow an employee to go to school, let's say nursing school, for several months and still receive 8 hours paid for work that is not rendered?
No.
So an elected DA can't just pay somebody for not doing work?
If he does, he's doing wrong.
Okay. Now, there was also some testimony on your cross-examination about letters or emails that could be sent to AOC to alert you about suspensions or firings, and that would affect whether someone's paid.
Yes.
And there was a question about if someone sent a letter that said an employee is under investigation for fraudulent hours worked, please don't pay them. You might not pay them if you receive that. You said that would actually go above your pay grade. But you would be made aware of that, correct?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It may go directly to the top.
If that were to occur in your training experience, would something like that make it into that personnel file?
If nothing was done about it, then no, it would not make it in personnel file because it was not part of the personnel record.
Okay. To your knowledge, was anything received about that type of circumstance in Cindy Blitzer's case?
No, sir.
Was there any letter or anything sent to your office that you're aware of or that makes it in the personnel file that indicates Cindy Blitzer was suspended by Wallace Bradsher?
No, sir.
Is there anywhere in that personnel file where I think you said you could receive an email about employees working odd hours or things like that for approval? Is that right?
Correct.
Is there any of that in that personnel file?
No, there's nothing requesting a schedule change.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is employee transfer sheets for several people. What do you mean? It's just got more than one person's employment history.
All from that name? Oh, okay.
Just like when they were, with their allotment change.
Okay.
I'm going to approach with State's Exhibit 10 for identification purposes. As I work it, if you will, take a moment to review that document and tell me what, if anything, you recognize that to be.
This is employee histories produced by the Beacon system.
Now, in looking at that, is that a document, again, that you use during the regular course of your business?
Yes, sir.
And in doing so, does it appear to be a fair and accurate representation of those employees' transfer histories or employment histories?
Yes, sir.
Appear to be altered in any way?
No, sir.
State would move to introduce that exhibit.
Any objection?
Not if she recognizes it.
Do you recognize that document?
Yes, sir.
Did you pull that document?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, then definitely no objection.
It's allowed.
In looking at that is there a employment history for an employee named Tyler Henderson?
Yes, sir.
In looking at that, can you tell me when, if ever, his employment switched from prosecutorial district to one prosecutorial district to another?
August 18th of 2015, from 9A to 17A. And then back to 9A on 11/1 of 16.
11/1/16.
Yes, sir.
Now, in looking at that, is that also an employment history contained in there for Pam Bradsher?
Yes, sir.
Is there a date on that employment history for Pam Bradsher for when she would have separated from her employment with the state?
She separated effective August 17th of 2015.
So the day before Tyler Henderson's employment began with that county.
Yes, sir.
Now, in going back to Tyler Henderson's employment history for that period of time, can you tell from that document how much his salary would have been when the day before he moved?
41,000.
And when he switched jobs, did he receive an increase in pay?
Yes.
What was his increase in pay?
He went to 46,900.
So when he went to 17A, he got a pay increase.
Yes, sir.
Now, in looking at that document that we talked about earlier, which were the allotments, would that have been able to have occurred, him to get a pay increase from the defendant during that period of time without firing or moving someone else around?
No, sir, because there was no money in the allotment.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you for being here. Great source of knowledge. First, I'll start with this Tyler Henderson pay increase.
Yes, sir.
Once the employment with 17A, Mr. Latour says the salary went to 46,900. Now, that would have been approved, as we talked about before, by AOC. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And there's a form of a salary increase that's signed off by the officials of AOC to approve that increase. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Second thing, Mr. Latour is saying if someone had, a hiring authority had said that an employee wanted to go to school like nursing school, that for Cindy Blitzer, a request could be made to reduce, not pay them to go to school, but reduce hours like you saw in the memo for Tyler Henderson in 2012. Is that
Yes, sir.
right? Okay. But there was no request like that from Cindy Blitzer, right?
I didn't see anything in the file.
Okay. And you wouldn't know whether or not Cindy Blitzer came to anybody in District 9A like Tyler Henderson did that said he was going to law school. And the bar regulations are you can't work more than 20 hours while you're in law school. You wouldn't have any knowledge
I
of
would
that.
have no knowledge.
But Shannon Mears, who appears on this email, she would be the one that you would communicate with when you needed to do a reduction of hours and benefits because a person could not work those additional hours while going to school. Is that right?
Shannon Mears would have been the one to contact for that district if there was a reduction in hours needed.
Okay, great. Finally, and maybe this will end it. In terms of a investigation of an employee reporting wrong hours, okay, let's talk about that. Does AOC have an investigator?
We have 3 internal auditors. Now, as far as an investigator within HR, no.
Okay. And are you familiar with a provision where anyone within your department could suspend pay while there's an investigation into whether or not an employee was misrepresenting hours?
The only person who could suspend pay would be the director, I would assume.
That is my last point. So if the director of AOC had been put on notice in July of this issue it would be within his discretion on whether or not to take some action to suspend pay or wait and let the investigation go on. Isn't that correct?
I would assume so.
Okay. And that would be the director, Judge Marion Warren. All right.
He was director at that time, yes.
Okay. What would be the best way to find the Shannon Mears communication from October 24th to 30th time frame? Is that something you would have control of the records of, or is that strictly from Shannon Mears with regards to the request to approve Cindy Blitzer's time?
If there even was a request, no, I would not have access to that.
That would come straight from Shannon Mears?
If there was a request made.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Let's go ahead and start. If you have a witness ready, let's go ahead, and we have about 20 minutes, so we'll get just started in on the next witness, and then we'll ask you to step out into the deliberation room for just a moment and leave your notepads in the chairs. I need to take up one matter outside the presence of the jury, and we'll bring you back in shortly. All right, outside the presence of the jury, Mr. Latour, who is your next witness, sir?
Cindy Blitzer, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Blitzer, if you'd come forward, please. You can just come right up here, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, could you tell us your name?
Cindy Blitzer.
Yes, ma'am. Are you represented by counsel? Have you retained counsel in connection with any of these?
Yes, I have.
All right, and is your counsel present with you here today?
He is not.
Okay. The question I have for you is, and are you intending to testify today? All right. I want to make you aware that if you do testify, you are waiving your constitutional privilege against self-incrimination. And what that means is that you'll be required to testify truthfully to questions that are posed to you by the prosecutor and questions that are posed to you by the defense, even if those answers that you give may tend to incriminate you or otherwise implicate you in any way. Do you understand that?
I do.
All right. Now, I understand just from other evidence I've received is you've not been charged with any offense. Is that correct?
No, sir.
All right. I understand, I believe that as part of a plea arrangement with your husband, there is an assurance from the Wake County District Attorney's Office that you would not be charged in connection with these matters. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, sir.
All right. But nonetheless, answers that if you do testify and you're asked questions that may reveal new information or that might otherwise implicate you or subject you to criminal prosecution, you understand that by testifying you're waiving that right to refuse to answer. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to consult with legal counsel about this specific issue, about your testimony in this trial?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions about that? Do you understand what I've explained to you?
I do.
And after hearing all of that, is it your decision to testify in this trial?
It is.
All right, very good. Either of you wish to be heard further on this?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
All right. I'm going to find that Ms. Blitzer has knowingly and voluntarily waived her privilege against self-incrimination and has elected to testify in this case after having been advised by counsel and understanding her rights with respect to this matter. Very good. I'll ask you to sit back down there. We'll bring the jurors back in. We'll get underway for a few minutes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Latour, further evidence for the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Cindy Blitzer.
Ma'am, if you would please place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Ma'am, do you solemnly swear the testimony you give before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Latour?
Thank you, Your Honor. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Cindy Blitzer.
All right, now, Ms. Blitzer, there's a microphone, and I don't know if you'll be soft-spoken or not, but if you do get a little quiet if you'll lean into the microphone or pull it closer to you so that they can hear you, okay?
Certainly.
Ms. Blitzer, how do you know Craig Blitzer?
He is my husband.
And how long have the two of you been married?
20 years.
Have any children?
1.
And can you tell us about your child, age, name, etc.?
Caden is his name. He's 15 and a half.
All right. And where do you live? Don't need an address necessarily, but what town do you live in?
Reedsville.
And how long have you lived in Reedsville?
20 years.
Where are you from before that?
Lexington.
And your husband, Craig, eventually became the elected district attorney of that county, Rockingham.
Yes.
What did he do before he was the elected district attorney in Rockingham County?
He was in private practice as an attorney.
Okay, and what were you employed?
With Craig, I worked with Craig, yes.
And how long had you worked with Craig?
Pretty much the duration of as his private practice, approximately 18 years.
What was your role in his private practice?
I did everything from typing to running errands to discovery to just anything he needed me to do, investigating any cases whatsoever.
All right. And so that was a law practice, right?
Yes, yes.
Did you want to continue to work in the law?
No, I did not.
What was your ultimate goal?
To be a nurse.
And why did you want to be a nurse?
Passion for caring for people, just enjoyed it.
Okay. And for a period of time while your husband was in private practice, everything was good between the two of you?
Yes.
And at some point, did your husband express to you some interest or someone's desire for him to run for political office, that being district attorney?
He did.
And would that have been around 2013?
Yes.
At that point, I know you said you were working for your husband. Were you in any type of schooling?
I was.
Tell us about your school at that time.
I was attempting to finish nursing school, and I was in my last class when he told me that he was going to run for district attorney.
Where were you in nursing school?
I was at Forsyth Tech,
Where is that located?
Winston-Salem.
How far is that from Reedsville?
It's probably 55 miles, maybe.
And while you were in nursing school, are you still helping out with your husband's law practice?
Yes.
And when your husband expressed this at least interest in running for elected office, what was your opinion of that?
Absolutely not.
And why is that?
Because I hate politics.
And can you tell us why that is?
I'm very private. I don't like my life out there as it is now. I just have never liked politics.
Okay. Did you express that concern to your husband?
I did.
Did you and your husband have any reservations other than you not wanting your life to be public about him running for public office?
I had reservations.
What were your reservations?
The cut and pay, the publicity, my son. I didn't want my son in the public eye.
Did you know that if he was to be elected district attorney, it would be a pay cut for you guys?
I did.
Okay. Was it a small pay cut or a substantial pay cut?
A substantial.
And in doing that, did you express those concerns to your husband?
I did.
And is this before or after he decided to run for elected office?
Before.
At any point, did he come to you and try to alleviate those fears for you?
I think it was something that he really wanted to do, so I stepped back and tried not to aggravate him too much about it.
All right. And when he decided to run for DA, that would have been, the election would have been when, 2014?
Yes.
And at this time, is it still your position in life that you have this one class left at Forsyth Tech?
Correct, yes.
And did you finish that class?
I did not,
Why did you not finish that class?
because I was trying to work with Craig, take care of our son, do clinical rotations, and go with him to political events. It became too much. I could not do it all, so I had to withdraw.
Okay, and you kind of had to choose to get rid of one of those things.
I did.
And the one you chose to get rid of was nursing school.
It was
How long had you been in nursing school up until that point?
2 years.
And when you stepped back from nursing school, how did that affect your life at all?
When I stepped, I'm sorry.
When you decided to stop going to nursing school and focus on these other things, did that have an effect on your life?
Well, I guess in some respects I was remorseful that I had to stop, but I had every intention of finishing. I just felt like I needed to be there for Craig at the moment.
Okay. And at that time, you say one of your responsibilities was taking care of your son, right?
Absolutely.
And where was Caden in school at that point?
Greensboro Day School.
How far is Greensboro Day School from your home?
Approximately 25 minutes.
Okay. And would you and your husband kind of share duties of taking him to school and back?
The majority of the duties fell on me.
Okay. And when you would have those duties, was that one of your top priorities? You got to get him there and you got to get him home, right?
Absolutely. Caden was always my priority.
Okay. And during that period of time when your husband is running for DA, what decision was made, if any, about what you would do for a living if he won?
We intended for me to finish nursing school and to nurse what I wanted to do.
Okay. Was there any reason other than you wanted to be a nurse that you wanted to finish nursing school?
Well, certainly, I mean, it was my passion. I mean, there's no doubt that there's good pay in nursing, but that's not why you go into it. It's certainly the passion that you have for it.
Okay. And in November of 2014, your husband Craig wins that primary, and then there's not going to be opposition.
Right.
Correct?
Correct, yes.
And so in November of 14, you kind of at that point know Craig's going to be the DA of Rockingham County.
Yes.
And when that occurs, is there some discussion about whether or not you're going to need to get a job?
Oh, yes.
And what was the discussion, and was that between you and Craig?
Yes.
What decision was made between the two of you?
That I was going to have to go, definitely go back to work and finish up this last class. We discussed that between the two of us.
Okay, well, where were you going to go to work?
He had said that I could come to work for him.
Okay, in the DA's office.
That's correct.
At that time, did you think there anything wrong with that?
No, I did not.
And it kind of sounds like you're telling us your intention, though, is always to go back and get that one class.
It was.
Well, did you ever go back to Forsyth and get that one class?
No, I couldn't go back to Forsyth. I had to find another college that I could go to, and generally you have to start over at least a year. It's not like you can just pick up in nursing school. You generally end up taking some classes over.
Why couldn't you go back to Forsyth?
Because I had withdrawn from Forsyth.
So you would have had to start over there again?
Yes, I would have had to reapply.
Okay. And do you recall what you did between the time that your husband actually takes office, which would have been January of 15,
Correct.
and that November of 14, when you realize he's going to eventually get to be the DA, what are you doing for that time period?
Okay, I'm trying to get the time right.
Yeah. From the time you know that he's won the election
Correct.
until the time he takes office, what are you doing?
I was finishing up one of my classes. I was in the process of finishing the class that I actually had to withdraw from because of the time constraints. I couldn't do it all. So I was in the class when he was running.
Okay. But at some point in that time frame, you end up having to step back.
I did,
Okay.
yes.
And once he gets elected and takes office on January the 1st of 2015, you come in and fill out the paperwork to go work for your husband.
That's correct.
And in the paperwork that you fill out to go work for your husband, you tell him who you are? As in your name?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know if you were asking if I told Craig who I was.
I'm
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
Did you tell
Okay.
the state of North
Yes,
Carolina
yes,
and
I'm sorry. Yes, yes.
the hiring authority, you're filling
Yes.
out job applications, etc., right?
Yes, correct.
And on those job applications, you put your name down.
That is correct.
And there's a section on there where they ask you how you heard about the job or something along those lines.
And I said my husband, he's the DA.
Okay. And then you send that paperwork in and you go to work.
That's correct.
And while you're working in Rockingham for a period of time, what are you doing once you've started your job in Rockingham County?
We were learning some things about the computer system. Melinda was teaching us some stuff because it was a whole new staff.
Who's Melinda?
She was the
Is that Melinda Richardson?
Melinda Richardson, yes.
She's an administrative assistant there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And she was helping us kind of understand the whole computer system, and we were getting our offices in order, and there were meetings and just trying to get adjusted.
Okay. And you had only worked in private practice as an assistant for a defense attorney.
That's correct.
Your husband had been an assistant DA at some point, though,
Yes, he had.
but you had never worked in a DA's office.
No, sir.
So when you first get in, there's an adjustment period for you, too?
That is correct. I did not know the computer system. I didn't know.
You didn't know how a DA's office worked?
No, I did not.
Okay. For that,
We're going to go ahead and break right here, and we'll start tomorrow morning at 9:30. So ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please recall the instructions. Don't talk among yourselves or with anyone else about the case. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation into these matters, and no conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. Leave all your materials there in the chair. Gather in the deliberation room at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you very much for your service. We'll see you at 9:30. Everyone else, please remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves.